Committee joint committee meeting will now begin. We've got all our members here, and as everyone knows by now, we have a very special guest who's going to be joining us today. I just want to start out. I really want to thank the governor for coming down. This is really unprecedented to have the governor himself come to a conference committee. It is such a refreshing contrast from predecessor who did not engage in the process. We have a governor who's engaged at every level, has been meeting with Democrats and Republicans, going to caucus meetings, and I really want to start out by acknowledging that, and it's that leadership that we've been so hungry for that has gotten us to where we are right now. Where we are right now is we have a conference committee where we have less items in conference than any other year in the previous history. We're 99% of what we're conferencing of what the governor has proposed. And that's a testament to his leadership, to the fact that he's brought forth a proposal that is balanced. It's very tough, as we know, but we're working with his leadership, and we've gotten to that place where we're 99% of his plan, and the Assembly and the Senate plans are literally within less than 0.3% of each other. So we're trying to conference those differences. Unfortunately, if it was just a matter of making those compromises, we would be done and we would have a budget. But of course, the difficult part here is that we've got members of the legislature who are signing pledges and saying that they're not going to support the budget no matter what, and are not being partners in terms of governing. Now, the folks here, we're talking about governing, we're working well together, and I'm hopeful that we can get there. And as I mentioned yesterday, I welcome ideas of what it takes to get people from no to yes, and bring those issues out on the table. But in order to get us over that finish line, we need leadership, continued leadership from our governor. And with that, I want to turn over the floor to our governor for any comments, and then we'll have a little bit of time for dialogue.
Okay, good. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak to you. You have the plan before you, which I believe is a balanced plan, tax extensions and serious and very painful cuts that very few people would like to make, and certainly I would very much like to avoid, but we can't. It's been too many years where the issue is either avoided, it's either obscured, or denied. And my goal in running for governor was not to evade or delay, but solve some of the big problems of California during the period that I would be able to serve the people again. I do this in the context of a very polarized electorate. We look across the country, whether it's in Congress, whether it's in other states, there's a lot of acrimony. And I can tell you, coming back here 28 years later, the division between the Republicans and Democrats is greater. And that's our big challenge, because the problems aren't going away. And pledges are interesting, and they make good theater. And I'm sure there'll be many pledges to come on many topics. But the fact is, we have to have a plan. We need a solution. And for those who say they don't want to vote, well, then why are you here? And if you're going to be here, give me some ideas. And do you have some reforms you want to make? Some things the Democrats don't like. Let's hear what they are. The Democrats are telling the Republicans things they don't want, but we have to get to collaboration. And I believe in this situation that a check-in with the people is absolutely mandatory. Mandatory not just to say, do we extend taxes? I said that in the campaign. And by the way, people voted overwhelmingly for my platform, and they said, okay, we want that check-in. We are the ultimate deciders. But it's also necessary to get the people's acceptance if we're going to have all these cuts. Because if you're going to have $25 billion in cuts, and you're going to cut 4 or 5 weeks of the school, then I think people are very shocked if you didn't ask their permission. And I think the voters ought to give us their permission for the cuts or the tax extensions. Both. Because this is drastic stuff. This is not garden variety. And I believe there's a reason why in the recent past, you have not been able to get an honest budget, because it's too painful. And it's so painful that I don't think you ought to do it on your own. Let's check in with the people. Let's hear what they have to say. And I know even among some Democrats, they say, why do you go to the people? Well, I think at some point, you have to restore legitimacy to the process. And we know whether it's Congress or the legislature or politicians in general, there's a lot of skepticism out there. So when you're going to make some big moves, that's very appropriate to consult the electorate. And that's really the point. So when you folks say no vote, no plan, no, that's not American. It's not acceptable, and it's not loyalty to California. And I don't expect you to agree with me, but I expect you to honestly say, I want to cut this. I want 4 weeks out of school. Or don't cut that. Let's cut the university. Or cut immigration. Cut mental health. Or cut whatever other services we have. Or find some tax extensions. But come up with a balanced plan. I think that's what the oath of office entails, that you're going to help the state really work out its problems. And I think America is facing a real challenge. The trillions of dollars of deficits, the overextension all over the world, and where's the leadership? And all they do is fight over who's going to be the next congressman, the next president, the next senator. I mean, I've been around a long time. I've been in politics a long time, and I play all the games that you all play. I'm telling you, time is running out for California and this country if politicians just keep squabbling all the time. And you got to get out of your comfort zone. Democrats, you got to make some cuts. You don't like them. You've already made a lot. You're going to have to make some more. Republicans, you're going to have to make a decision here. And just saying no, I think, does a disservice to your constituents. And I don't think we can keep this state going on the even keel if we're just going to have this kind of non-collaboration, non-representative. So anyway, that's my point. We get into details. I've heard one fellow says, some people say, well, let's put tax cuts on the ballot. Well, fine. Add another $12 billion. But then you got to find $12 billion more in cuts. Then the cuts will be $37 billion. And put that list out, if that's what you mean. Or maybe you mean something else. But I hear a lot of words around here, and I don't think we can fiddle while the state's credit rating is the lowest in the country, while 12% of the people are out of work. We got to kind of get to the heart of the matter, and it's tough. And it may be even tougher for Republicans than it is for Democrats in some way. But Republicans are supposed to be tough. So make some tough choices. That's all I'm asking you. Thanks.
And do you have a moment for some questions from the group? I'll start out with one question, then I'll take questions. Has there been a single Republican coming to you and saying that they're truly committed to an all-cuts budget? I mean, are people...
Well, no one has elaborated that. By the way, I've had very positive discussions with all the members. And so far, things are very cordial at this point. So I want to make sure we can take that spirit and get to an answer. But no one has said all cuts. And I'm reading some of the local newspapers, and they're laying off teachers and police in many cities. I mean, this is a tough deal. If we go the $25 billion, I want to make one thing clear, and that's another reason I came here. If we don't get the tax extensions, I am not going to sign a budget that is not an all cuts budget. And it's going to be turbulent. And because I don't want to be here 4 years and play games or evasion and everything just erodes. I think we got to meet the moment of truth now. And it's either the tax extensions and the $12 billion, or it's $25 billion, or as close to that as we're going to get. And then if we can't do that, then we don't get a budget. And we just sit here and wrangle like they do in some places. So I think the stakes are very, very high, and I feel at this stage of my life that I'm going to be the truth teller, and I'm going to make the tough choices, and I would ask that all of you help me in that process, particularly you, Jim, because you've been around almost as long as I have. And I know you got some tough constituents up there. I got a few relatives in your district, and they're a pretty hard, rock-ribbed Republican. Some of them didn't even vote for me. But I hope you'll help us find, and if you can't do it yourself, find a few other colleagues that are that are in maybe somewhere else in California that might step up to the plate.
We have questions from members. Mr. Emerson, followed by Mr. Huff.
Governor, we're now 2 weeks away from your target date for a budget, and yet we have not seen the language on realignment. Can you give us some indication when we'll be able to see that?
Good. That's a very good question. That's why I brought Anna here. When are we going to see? I just asked you that an hour ago.
Very, very, very soon, in the next coming days. There are some pieces.
Can we get it by the weekend?
I
Monday?
Yeah.
Monday.
Monday.
Okay, Monday. Monday by by 11:59 p.m. Okay, we get it for Monday.
Well, since it is part of the plan, it makes it very difficult for us to vote on a number of these issues that we're going to be facing in the next few days. And that's why I asked the question, because I thought that information should be forthcoming.
Okay. Can we give them a little more specificity to help with if it's relevant to any of the votes?
Yeah, the specificity of the plan is already available. Some of the language associated with realignment in terms of for example, the public safety elements is already available. The constitutional amendment will be to you by Monday.
And I'm meeting with police groups today. We're changing some of the crimes that were going to be handled at the local level. So we're working with each of the different groups to listen, and we're changing things. This is not set in stone. So we want to make adjustments.
Mr. Huff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Governor, thank you for coming here. I do appreciate that. Appreciate your availability and engaging in the conversation and trying to move the state forward. You proposed a budget that was $8 billion in cuts and $14 billion in tax increases. It was called balance. It's not exactly a balance between cuts and taxes. The rest was some borrowing and stuff. But the Democrats here have backed away from that by about $900 million. They have substituted some permanent cuts with some temporary cuts and transfers and things. That leaves us now with 1/3 cuts, 2/3 new taxes. Is that your position now?
No, I wouldn't describe it that way.
I understand, but those are the numbers.
No. Well, that's why I got my expert over here, because I knew you'd ask me some tough questions. Do you want to try to respond to that, Anna? There has been some solutions that are not as permanent as we would like, and we're going to be pushing back on that where we can. But I think on some of those taxes, I think it is closer to 50-50. Can you describe that?
I think the plan included about $12.5 billion in spending reductions, with the proposed changes to the sale lease, with the elimination of the sale leaseback and the alternatives. The spending reductions are actually $12.7 billion. There are some changes between the governor's approach and the approach before you. There are a lot of similarities in terms of reductions in Medi-Cal and developmental services, and reductions to CalWORKs, reductions to in-home supportive services, and a whole host of programs. And we'll continue to work to better refine some of those cuts.
But what I would say, Bob, why don't you propose, change it a little bit. You come up with some more cuts and put it on the table here. So why don't we do that?
Well, the LAO has outlined some others, but I just want to tell you the Republicans were here voting for your cuts. It was the other guys, your party, that was backing away from them and putting in one-time solutions and gimmicks, which you said you didn't want to have in this budget. That's why I'm just trying to understand if things have changed.
No, things aren't changing. We're not satisfied yet. We're still pushing. But maybe you and I can talk about this. We want to find some more cuts. But we're taking money from, we're trying to put this thing together in the best way we can. And I would say that never have so many tough cuts been put in a budget any time before. So let's acknowledge that we've come a long way. And if you can find some better ones, then come on down. I'll be glad to talk about it.
Thank you.
Mr. Leno, followed by Mr. Nielsen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Clearly, these are not ordinary times, as you've already said, Governor. You reminded me that your first 8 years as governor, you never once came to a conference committee. That this is a very extraordinary time. So we're pleased to welcome you. And I'm glad that you brought up this issue of pledge taking and vow taking. And I think we should be able to talk about this among ourselves as well. And I know a couple of our colleagues who are here have joined on to this Pledge Plus caucus. And why I think vows and pledges are dangerous to our process here is because, by definition, they are politics trumping policy, because they literally abrogate our legislative responsibility to a special interest, whatever that special interest may be. On our side, we are asked to sign pledges, and our leaders of each house have reminded us and been very clear not to sign pledges and to put it on our leaders. Say, if someone's asking you to sign a pledge, tell them to talk to me. Because no matter who's asking for the pledge, it's interfering with the hard choices that we have to make. I would suggest we might want to form a no-pledge caucus. Though I'd have to admit, the only pledge I have signed is not to take money from the tobacco industry. But aside from that, I've not signed any pledges, and it's for real reason. So I'd like to think that people could reconsider why pledges are put before us and why would we even consider signing a pledge, because it literally does interfere with what we've done. And my question is, I heard on the radio this morning a statement coming from the Taxpayers Caucus press conference yesterday that the reason they're moving forward was out of their frustration with you, that you had told them that you have no interest in any kind of pension reform, and they listed a few other things as well. But I remember Labor Day breakfast in San Francisco that the Labor Council put on, where in the many things that you said you would do as governor, you had mentioned pension reform. So I just wondered where you are and where you think we might be on that because they claim you have absolutely refused
there was
pension reform.
There was some loose rhetoric at that press conference. I've never said no to anything. Of course, I didn't say yes to anything either. I was listening, and that's what I hope people would do. Just let's get it out on the table. By the way, in terms of pledges, it reminds me of vows. And I took vows once. I took vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. But I was able to get a dispensation to get out of them. Now, it took the Pope to do that. But I want we can set up a process that we can dispense people from pledges. And I'm working on that now. So any Republican that wants a dispensation, they should come down to my office. And we're going to work up a little process that you can apply to. But by the way, this is not a no tax. This doesn't violate any no tax pledge. In fact, if I give you a little political advice, you should be voting for this and then join the campaign against it. Go out to the people, because this is a choice. The people do get to make a choice. They can vote yes, they can vote no. And if they're going to vote yes, they're going to avoid some cuts and they're going to extend some taxes. If they vote no, then they're going to vote for $25 billion in tax cuts. And I'm sure these people who have a caucus here can continue their work. They can make a political action committee out of it. And because it's a ballot measure, you don't even have to worry about any limits. You can raise money to your heart's content. But it doesn't violate a pledge. And I'm an expert in pledges and vows because I don't take them very often. So you can vote to put this on the ballot, and it's completely consistent because you're saying the people are sovereign in California. As we know, under the Constitution, the ultimate power is with the people. Now, you're supposed to do the work most of the time, but when you get a really tough problem, and this is tough by witness the fact that we haven't really got this far before, this is one where let's include the people. So I think that it's really a total misrepresentation to say that it is a tax increase to allow the people of California to vote on something so fundamental as their education, public safety, and the other matters that are paid for with the money that they provide. So to me, everyone should be able to agree on this at the level of putting it before the people. Then it will be, we can have great debates. And if you join Jim and debate me, you get a lot more coverage. So we can go to Calusa. We can go to all those places. I'll be glad to do it. So that's my challenge. Let's get it on the ballot, and then let's have teams go out and let the people decide. Because it's very fundamental whether you include it, whether you vote the taxes or you vote the cuts. It's not business as usual. California will look different. It will be different, and that's why I think the people ought to decide on what kind of a difference it's going to be.
Mr. Nielsen, followed by Ms. Skinner.
Governor, thank you so much, and I must tell you, Governor, I feel very blessed to have an opportunity many years later to again serve with and work with you. We were laughing about it the other day, you and I, when we first came together, me as a very young rookie senator and you, the re-elected governor. We immediately began disagreeing on the Medfly and the peripheral canal.
Well, I think we agreed on a library bill.
We did indeed, and that'll be before us this day.
In fact, you wrote me a letter commending me for that. I thought I vetoed some money for libraries.
Well, you see, you vetoed it first, and then you signed it. You vetoed it before you signed it. But
I was glad. That's why I wasn't sure of that. Yeah. So I actually did the right thing.
Yes, you did, sir.
And I thank you for the letter.
And we're going to try to save some of it at least today. Governor, indeed, it is unprecedented, and I commend you beyond coming to this committee, which is truly unprecedented in my opinion, but all the interest that you have been reaching out to. That is constructive and helpful, and inculcate a little bit more humor into this. You know, I can't seek a dispensation. I'm a Baptist. But I guess I could seek forgiveness. That would be a possibility. Republican thoughts on taxes, generally that's not the way to fix government. And I've argued that raising taxes to fund this deficit simply funds what's broken. And I think you agree, and you've suggested some ways to have the long-term and enduring. And that's what we are in the long-term looking out for. We would also observe that the voters have, in fact, voted on these May 19th of 2000 extension, and they said no. And in part, last November on the VLF increase for state parks, they said no very loudly again. So there are some signals in the citizenry out there. You can poll what you want, but we look at the fact that the voters have made a statement. Now, we are, of course, going to offer constructive thoughts, and I have all along. And you know me. I don't come to the table and just sit around and say no. I've offered many suggestions over years, and they will continue. And that would apply to realignment. And I'd kind of like to be engaged in the front end of realignment rather than the back, meaning I spent a lot of years in the trenches as you and I worked together when you were mayor, and I was chairman of the Board of Prison Terms on parolee issues. Well, I think I've got a lot of expertise and ideas, and I've offered a lot of them here in this committee, and I won't bore you with the details, but those are the things that we would like to offer up. And in terms of realignment, it's kind of like sentencing policy and parole policy. Whenever you change something, you better look at the long-term implications, and realignment has enormous long-term implications, particularly in terms of public safety. And, you know, I applaud you. That is something that's a very Republican position. The government is best that's closest to the people. But it cannot be in the form of, which has been historic around here, the state dumps its problems on local government. And then if we're going to then say by 55% you solve the problem because it's your program now, I would indicate in terms of realignment the conversation must begin with mandates. That whatever we would cede to local government, they have maximum control over the population they serve, how they serve that population, or in fact whether or not they serve that population. And there's fruitful grounds for discussion there. And on sometimes of the long-term reforms, I'm not aware of you saying no at all to pension reform, and we must acknowledge last October some significant pension reform did occur here in negotiations and with the affirmation of the MOUs and in fact the change of a governing statute. But I think it's safe to argue that we're not there yet, that there more needs to be done. And we can have our constructive dialogue on all of that. I would say, though, in addition, that I can't see a bifurcation, meaning we put certain things before the voters now and then work the details out later, as in realignment. I think we need to put the whole deal in front of the voters. It's hugely dangerous, particularly with realignment, to let government decide how that will then be defined, again, because of the long-term consequences. So I certainly will engage with you and continue to offer good and constructive suggestions, particularly in the area of corrections, Governor. And again, I want to thank you very much for coming.
Thanks, Jim.
It's an honor to serve with you again, sir.
Thank you.
Ms. Skinner, followed by Ms. Harkey.
Thanks. And I just want to acknowledge my colleague, Assemblymember Nielsen's acknowledgement. I think is often lost in the debate that while it may not have gone as far as some people desired in October in the adoption of the 2010-11 budget, there were some significant pension reforms that were included in that, both in the collective bargaining agreements that were adopted and then in some other areas. So I appreciate that you pointed that out, because it seems like often in the debate that part gets lost. I wanted to express, Governor, that, and I think many of my colleagues join with me in this, that your direct and straightforward approach to us and to the public is appreciated and refreshing. That we, I think that you are laying it out very squarely to us and very squarely to the public, exactly the circumstance we're in. And while I probably feel that there was less of the kind of fooling that some people feel that in the past, I think that, yes, you're absolutely correct. Much of what, it's a natural approach to try to soften the pain, to try to, that, you know, if we really embraced the full weight of how the drops in revenues due to the economy and such have affected our ability to provide the level of service and state program that people expect, we're basically crippled. We are not in the position to provide the level of service and program to the residents of California that they have come to expect. And so we have sort of hidden that by the lack of this kind of straightforwardness, there's sort of been a hiding of that fact. Now, my part of my comment is we've had that historical problem of sort of hiding that fact, but we also have the disconnect where many of our residents, if you ask them, you know, how does the state budget affect them, they understand very well that their local government budget is very real to them, because they understand police services, fire services, street repair, things that are very direct, very tangible. But when this comes to a state budget, some people can only imagine the DMV. They have no concept of what it is that state funding affects them in their day-to-day life. Even schools, many Californians think, well, there's a local school board. It must be, they have a disconnect between the fact that it's state funding and state revenues that really do impact our schools. So I think part of my question is sort of how do we, given that disconnect, really help Californians understand how these decisions directly affect them when they have such a kind of lack of knowledge of how much state expenditures really do affect them on a day-to-day level.
Well, I think the takeover by the state of so many local functions makes it so much more complicated. And through the realignment, I really believe there will be a greater clarity about what is being done. And you'll notice in some of these tax extensions, we devote the money to the local, to schools particularly, and to local government, to police services. I think this will help. It's not perfect, but I think it's going to make it clearer what it is people are getting. I also think putting this whole matter before the people will allow for a great debate to take place between now and June, and will certainly be one of my most important goals is to clarify and to engage in this dialogue in a way that will illuminate what it is the state does and what it is that we're not going to be able to do, and what it costs.
Next question from Ms. Harkey, followed by Mr. Fuentes.
Governor, good morning, and I, too, am very, very pleased to see you. I think I got patched into a Channel 3 news report that was not supposed to be part of what was going on the Capitol steps. I was talking about budget reform here, and so if I am the person that's being alluded to up on the dais, I have no problem saying I won't raise taxes. My people have told me time and time again that that's what they want to hear. But I do want to correct a little bit. When you were in with our caucus, we asked you if you would put some pension reform on the ballot, and you said no. We asked you if you would do some regulatory relief or help us with some of that. In particular,
I don't think I did say that, because that's not my position. I think if we can get some pension reform, if we can get some regulatory relief, that would be a very good thing.
Well, if we could get that on the ballot this time,
hopefully we could make some.
I would like to see that. Regulatory relief, in particular, I recall it was, with regard.
Well, if we get it on the ballot, would you then join and get it on the ballot?
We have. Let me see what you're putting on.
Okay, but if you want to do that, if that's serious, let's do it.
No,
we want some pension reform. We want some regulatory reform. I probably want more than some of these folks want.
I'm sorry, Governor.
This is your chance to make them do something that they don't want to do. All you got to do is step up and do something you don't want to do.
It is my chance. Unfortunately, we have raised taxes before. We have implemented mild little pension reform that it doesn't do a thing for us now. We passed Prop 25 a couple years ago, or last year. I believe the people decided on a majority vote budget. Unfortunately, what you're being faced with, and I have sympathized with you on many occasions, is that for the first few months of this year, December is the last report that I get from the controller, we have taken in $43 billion in revenues, and we have spent $54 billion. So we're begging, borrowing, stealing. And also from the controller's report, we have unemployment increasing in the state of California. I have an LAO report here that says from the legislative analyst that says if we were to reduce unemployment by 2%, it would add $1.1 billion. So I want to work with you in whatever way we can, but you control the message. You're the big guy here. What you say hits the papers. And so I want to have a pro-growth message for you, with you, for California. Yes to private sector jobs. We need those because we have to have people working to generate the revenues that you need. But the only thing we ever hear in this House about revenues is increasing taxes. And yes to regulatory relief. That is an extra tax. We have to have some kind of halt. There's 2,000 bills coming out of this House going to hit your desk. Many of them were rejected by the previous governor, a lot of regulatory issues. And they are praying that you're going to sign these, and I hope you don't, because we are killing our state's private sector employment. I have an article here from one of the members on the other side of the aisle where businesses are now fleeing to Yuma across the border. I mean, how desperate can you be? Yes to helping you reduce state spending. We are yes to helping you, and I have provided your staff, maybe it didn't get to you, with ideas as how we can do this. A 20% across-the-board cut in all departments without personnel, taking personnel issues totally off the table, saves us $1.2 billion. Now, I say yes to that. Let's do that. Let's show the people of California that the state can downsize, that we can trust the people, the employees of California State, to know what they need to spend, what they don't, and where they can save. I say yes to all those things. I've got some more yes suggestions, but you control the press. And when you say that all we say is no, I'm very, very hurt and very insulted, because I have tried to have an open dialogue on this. But the only thing that you want yes to, and the only thing that the members of the other side of the aisle want yes to, because they have a majority party budget, is yes to more taxes. And we can't go there. We need to see something. The people of California need to see something done on their behalf by the leaders up here. And if the leaders up here want to raise taxes, they can do so. But I think we're having a lot of waffling on your side of the aisle for doing that, and they want us to walk the plank with them, but only for that. So I'm sorry. I would love to end this on a happy note. I appreciate you coming. You have been the most forthcoming governor. We never saw the last one. And because of the last governor, you're dealing with what you have today, and I apologize for that. But we have to move forward, and we have to quit ridiculing each other for trying to support what we believe in and trying to move the ball forward. Thank you.
Just a couple of points there. When you try to cut 20% from the state to generate $1 billion, I mean, we are trying to cut as much as we can. If you hit the prisons at 20%, you'd be talking releases. This would be pretty serious. So we got to look at it with a scalpel, not just a sledgehammer. And we are cutting billions. So if there are some easier ways to do it, I'll be glad to look at that. And again, we're talking not about new taxes. We're talking about extending the ones that people have gotten used to. And they're there, and we're only talking about it for a temporary period, or we're talking about the cuts. And as I tell people, I will hold up the budget until we get the cuts, if that's where you want to go. But I think it's so serious, the impact on schools, on public safety, that I think we ought to have the voters weigh in on that, yes or no. And obviously, I want to see a yes, but you want to see a no. I think that would really reinvigorate the democratic process if we actually had a debate. And I think it would be good. I'd even debate you in Orange County. You'd get a lot of coverage, but you got to vote to put it on the ballot. If you want to debate me, you got to vote to put it on the ballot so we can have a legitimate debate that you feel good about. If you don't feel good about it, then there's not much to talk about. And remember, it's not a tax. It's a let the people speak.
Thank you. Mr. Fuentes, followed by Mr. Lowenfeld.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Unfortunately, Mr. Chair, you and I are not going to benefit from any of that increased coverage because the debates are going to be in support of the governor's proposal. But I wanted to thank you, Governor, really for what you're talking about between now and June about the great debate that you're talking about. I think from just your brief sort of visit here, you can see how quickly this committee will confuse some of the pension sort of scapegoating with what the budget pressures are otherwise. And I think that's part of our challenge in trying to communicate to California sort of what we're in right now. Pensions certainly have some cost pressures on our budget, but I mean, the problem that we have is structural, and I think your approach, while very painful, is the honest approach, and it's something that we're working to try to realize. But I have to agree in part with Senator Nielsen on the realignment proposals. I am very concerned about the potential impacts to local government. Now, I enjoy being in the fiscal position here to sort of account for those savings and score them now, and happy to do so as we sort of work out with our colleagues in the Senate how to get there. But I'm trying to sort of envision what your sort of philosophy, your thoughts, your ideas on how we roll out the phase that actually sort of describes the magic that's going to have to take place in order to get these realignment proposals put together. I've got to commend you. Your staff has done, I think, a very good job given sort of the aggressive time frame that we're operating in. But the rollout and the communication, I think, of the realignment proposals and how it's going to work without really stressing sort of I think, what's already a frail infrastructure at the local level is incredibly important to me. So I would be happy to hear a little bit about that and want to partner in that. But the second thing I also want to sort of point out and hear your thoughts on is we've had an awful lot of conversation, and I wish that we had as much conversation on redevelopment, or rather on some of the cuts that we're making as we're having on redevelopment. And I'm a huge proponent of the RDAs, but frustrated in large part by the fact that we're spending so much time trying to figure out how to save that versus the other sort of terrible cuts that we're making. But nonetheless, sort of putting my local government hat on, I understand what a tremendous tool that is for local government, and I'm wondering if you are open to, and I understand that the big city, or the big 8, I guess is what they call themselves, have a proposal out there which I think is very difficult to sort of understand and score for our purposes, but are you open to some sort of redevelopment reform where we sort of, rather than look at 1945 sort of blight laws, look at high poverty, high unemployment areas, and look at resetting the system as opposed to outright eliminating it?
Well, I think we can reset the system, but the proposals that have been brought forth to date don't quite do it. And if they were adopted, we'd have to find even more cuts than we've already presented. And you know, that's not so easy as it is. There are some other ways that we could make it possible for redevelopment to become some local option that the people themselves could vote on. And I've mentioned that, and that needs to be more developed. But I think that's an idea that you ought to explore. But we need, that money is needed by the schools and public safety and the vulnerable people that depend on the county hospital and other kind of core activities that are so important. Now, I'm not saying redevelopment isn't good. I certainly used it, and we have benefited from it. But nothing necessarily is forever, and when we're facing a crisis, we have to decide between children and schools and public safety or some of these projects. And as we know, some of them, turn into stadiums or turn into access to certain museums and things. I mean, there's a lot of good along with the less important. So it's just a matter of making hard choices, and you can look at. You can just look at the whole menu, and so redevelopment is a good, but there's other goods that also have to be preserved. So it's just a choice you got to make. And if you want to hold some redevelopment, then you got to find some other cuts, and you're having a hard time doing that. So it's not that we want to go there, but that's just where we're headed. By the way, on the realignment, there was something mentioned. I think Jim mentioned that to really make it work, you've got to give some discretion. And I suppose to the extent you give discretion, then there's things that you want to see done that maybe some of the counties won't have to do. So that is going to be a dilemma. That's one of the hard things to chew on. What will the counties be able to decide to do if they're going to be asked to do them? And you can't tell them, do this and do that and take square turns. They're going to have to be able to make their own choices, and that's where the savings comes, and that's where returning government to the lower level, that's what it's all about.
Mr. Lowenthal.
I, too, want to appreciate your coming, Governor, and I want to say a few things. First, even though we see throughout this nation this extreme partisanship that's occurred, I would like to say that it's been an honor for me to serve on the conference committee. I think we treat each other with respect here in California. What we see, we have tremendous differences, but I truly believe both Republicans and Democrats want to come to a solution and want to work together. So I think we're quite different, and with your leadership, I hope we can continue that dialogue, which I think we already have. I just want to follow up on one of the things that was just pointed out by Assemblymember Fuentes. I think we here, and many of us have come from local government, I voted and I support your initiative on the elimination of redevelopment. I do, not because I don't see the importance of it, but I understand we have to prioritize. We cannot keep subsidizing redevelopment agencies by backfilling schools and counties and so forth, and that is not really necessarily the role that we should be doing. But in my discussions with my local counterparts, in explaining that we would work together in the future on what might be possible to replace it, I just want, before you became governor, to share with you that there has been a tremendous lack of trust between local government and state government that we must repair as we move forward. That we told them a number of years ago when we took $350 million from that would be the only time that we did it, and then we took more money each time and to balance our budgets. I think I voted for those. I justify those, but I truly understand where other governments feel that there's a lack of trust between us and local government. And I think that the major underlying thing that we have to repair is that trust relationship. And I just want to share that with you, Governor.
Right. Well, there's a lot of trust relationships that we need to repair, particularly with the voters.
Mr. Nielsen had a follow-up, and then Mr. Huff had a follow-up.
Governor, this is not on the substance of the issues before us, but a greater substance, and I think it's more than symbolism. It's you coming here, or you reaching out like you have. Someday I'm going to write a book about the splendid loneliness of leadership, and you and I both know what that feels like. But many who come to positions of leadership, indeed in this building, tend to become very imperial and imperious and get caught up in the trappings and the power. You clearly, by your example, have not done that. You've come here, I don't say in a humble way, but in a very respectful way. But it does mean you've not into the ego and the power of governor, and it's a gesture of working together in comity that's all too rare in society. So I take this example that you have set as a challenge for all of us, all Californians, in guiding how we treat each other in the future. For that example, I thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Hupp with follow-up, then Mr. Negrete-McLeod, and then I know we're respectful of your time. We'll let you go after that, if that's
Go
okay.
write all that realignment language.
Yes.
I thought that's why you brought on. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Governors across the nation are confronting unsustainable public employee costs, pensions, benefits such as health care, automatic salary increases, lifetime job protection, quality blind employment. It's things like that that are driving us, part of what's driving an unsustainable structural imbalance. In fact, your own budget, should it be approved as it was, and we haven't crunched the numbers since we backed away from that sum, actually grows the state general fund by 31%, about $25 billion at the end of your 5-year tax increase. And yet your plan didn't lay out things like this that would hit that systemic underlying problem. Now, when my colleague brought up the need for this, you tried to tie it to a vote for putting the thing on the ballot. I can understand your desire to find those votes, but why is it we have to why is it that these reforms don't stand alone, and are you willing to help tackle this regardless of whether you get the votes to put things on the ballot?
Well, I've said I would before we even talked about this vote. I have a webpage where I laid out the framework for pension reform. But the fact is that just as you are espousing some thoughts, so too the Democrats, and that's why this tax vote is a chance to achieve some changes that will be more difficult, because I don't have any votes here. I have a no vote called the veto, but all the measures that can ever get to my desk have to come from the legislature. So I'll be suggesting things, and I'll be listening, I'll be working with people, but I'm also trying to get the job done. So on the one hand, I'm listening to the Democrats, I'm listening to the Republicans. It's a very sharp conflict here, and I think this is a moment, because we've got a time deadline, and we have a unique opportunity here where there is a time to make some changes, and I'm sure they'll be willing to do some things they might not otherwise do. So that's why I do think it's different. But yeah, we can keep working on different pensions. You know, I believe people should be working longer. I think institutional memory is a good thing. So I don't have a problem with extending how long people are supposed to work. And I do find it a little troubling when people leave at rather early ages, and then they don't leave, then they take a second job. So I mean, there's some issues here. They're very politically dicey. So that's why sometimes in the hothouse of crisis, you can make some changes that you otherwise won't be able to accomplish. And I know Bill has been thinking about that as well, and I'm looking for your list too.
Yes.
As well as you're
So
looking.
were you talking about people being here longer? Were you addressing that to the legislature, or?
Well, the legislature too. I think we have. I think it's very helpful to have. It's very helpful to see what was done in the past, see what's doing now. In fact, I was talking to someone about one of our big institutions, and I said, can you give me somebody who's been around for 25 years? I want to know. I want someone who really has the wisdom. Well, we don't have anybody that's been around 25 years. I'm not talking about legislators. I'm talking about one of our prominent institutions. People are in and out. Well, I think you need some longevity, and I think you need some knowledge and skill and wisdom that comes from some of that. And so that is an argument against term limits, which I'm not ashamed to make.
Yeah, back to my question, though. I understand there's some things that you don't have the ability to bring bills to your desk. You do have the ability to negotiate MOUs with the unions. You've scored $300 to $400 million on labor savings. Can you give us a report on how those negotiations are going?
They're still going. So they're still going. They're difficult. They're difficult, and we have many goals here. We're trying to get the maximum savings from the state, and we're attempting to get the maximum support for our various realignments. So we've got a lot of fish to fry here.
I know you've been good about meeting with us. Have you sat down with the negotiators from those different unions?
I have talked to some. Yes, not all, but I've talked to some.
Okay, well,
some of the biggest.
We're hesitant to score savings that have not been realized without tangible things. Also, that's just one of the other little unfinished business. So
the contract.
Hope you can bring us something soon. Thank you.
Well, we're working at it.
Ms. Negrete McLeod.
I just thought I'd better say something since everybody else said something.
You don't have to say anything. You never get in trouble for what you don't say.
I just want to thank...
You have a right to remain silent, and you can consult an attorney, which I am, by the way.
So my comment will just be thank you for coming.
Thank you. Brevity is the soul of wisdom or wit or something. I can't remember which.
We're about to end. Ms. Harkey says she has one very quick follow-up, and then we really will end.
I do, thank you. And
The debate schedule.
I'm assuming that you want to see my reductions as well.
Yes,
and my
of course.
help. Thank you. But I do have a question that might have helped this group for as we go on with our debating here. On realignment, I asked yesterday, since we're just asking for tax dollars to fund same programs, is there a reason that we have to tie these to immediately going down to the counties, or can we work on the realignment to be sure we get it right, and just put the taxes separately on the ballot? I mean, that the plan will eventually be to realign some of these issues. But before we just put out a half-baked idea on realignment and then figure out if it works, I'm just very concerned with taking state duties down to the locals without knowing what the federal impacts are, the state's mandates, other things. Thank you.
Well, I don't think they're half-baked, but Diane, do you want to...
And a lot of the realignment builds on work that's been done for years in terms of how, for example, populations can be better managed locally in the corrections world, and how to integrate the services that are being provided in the community. What are different things that counties can do in a different manner than how the state does it? Looking at flash incarceration versus the longer term time that we've got at the state level. The plan builds on work that has been done. Counties already administer the Child Welfare Services Program, for example. So many of the programs that are included in realignment, it's about looking at reducing duplication between the state and local functions. There's a lot of work that has been done here. Part of the reason for some of the delay in language is continued work with local government around areas where they would like to see additional flexibility, input their thoughts on how to do things differently, and what are the things that would be helpful for them as they look at assuming greater responsibility for some of these programs. So it's building on work that's been done, and building on work with local governments about the tools that would provide that would help them be more successful in administering these programs.
Mr. Governor, there's been a lot of talk about pledges, and I think there's one pledge that I think I can make on behalf of myself and all of the members of this committee, which is when and if whatever proposals come forward that take us from no to yes by our colleagues who are willing to go there, we will work with you closely and vet those proposals here in this conference committee, and we'll work as hard as we can and take whatever time is necessary to make that happen in time to meet our deadlines. Thank you so much for coming out and spending so much time with us.
Thank you. Very, very cordial.
All right.
We'll be back.
All right. Why don't we do roll call and then break? Quorum. Or a quorum? Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, while the room's clearing, why don't I have LAO and Finance come up, and we'll start working through the agenda, doing on the resources agenda. What is this? I don't know. Why am I don't know what I'm passing down. If we could have everyone who's not going to stay in the room, please clear the room right now so we can proceed. So I need some order in the room, please. Order in the room, please. Okay, we're gonna start working our way through some of the open items. We're certainly coming back to the major issues that we were discussing before, but we're working on getting through a first pass of all the items, and I think we'll have time to do some of the resources issues before we take our lunch break. So with that, we're going to, page 8 of the major conference issues is where we'll begin on the natural resources and environmental protection issues, and I'd like to ask the Department of Finance to walk us through issue number 1.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This first one is a proposed $162 million transfer from a PUC surcharge, and we're still looking at the details of this, and really less on the programmatic effect and more just on the legal implications of the transfer and its implications as it relates to our Proposition 98 minimum guarantee, but at this point we're still reviewing the details.
Okay, LAO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Tiffany Roberts, Legislative Analyst Office. Let me say first and foremost that we do support and recommend the Senate action that was taken that would transfer these particular funds from the Gas Energy Efficiency Fund into the general fund. Secondly, the Legislative Council has determined that this option is legal. Council has issued opinions that the source of these funds are considered taxes, and Council stated that unless there is a voter-approved initiative or a provision in the Constitution that tax revenues can be used at the discretion of the legislature. And as such, Council stated that it considers these funds to be general fund fungible. As such, this option does provide you with a means to achieve significant general fund savings. Also, just to provide you a little bit of background about this in terms of the programmatic area, these particular programs provide such things as discounts and rebates to utility customers for purchasing energy-efficient home appliances. Additionally, the CPUC has authorized a $3.2 billion energy efficiency program, and a large portion of that program would continue. This one-time fund transfer is modest in comparison to that program.
Okay. We have some questions from our panel. Mr. Fuentes, followed by Mr. Emerson.
Thank you. For the LAO, of the $162 million there that is in the natural gas consumption surcharge, how much of that is sort of for the low-income care, LIHEAP sort of programs? And is that dollar amount sort of what we believe to be in the fund now, the $162 million?
Currently, the 162 does not represent any programmatic effect to the low-income energy efficiency portion, nor does it impact the CARE program.
So you're saying the 162 is above and beyond whatever the other programmatic costs are with regards to LIHEAP and CARE?
That's correct.
What are those dollar amounts?
For LIHEAP, when you're looking at the entirety of the gas consumption surcharge, it's roughly in this budget year $560 million. Of that, roughly 20% would go to LIHEAP. Roughly half of that would go to the CARE program. A small portion, around $25 million, would be transferred over for gas energy research to the Energy Commission, and the remaining portion of that
with respect to sort of the legal, you all believe that the Ledge Council has given us an opinion that it's perfectly okay for us to take the $162 million. Is that this? Can that same sort of legal opinion apply to the PEER account or the PEER monies under AB 118? Or the Renewable Resources Trust Fund?
That's correct. All of that except the entirety of the AB 118 program, because $10 million of the PEER funds is transferred into AB 118. Those would be accessible, but because of constitutional provision, anything else in AB 118 would not be accessible.
But PEER and the Renewable Resources, the RRTF, we can go after that.
That's correct.
Very good. Thank you.
Mr. Emerson, followed by Ms. Skinner.
I have a a couple of questions, and I guess it's to the Department of Finance. Are we transferring money that was already under contract from the gas utility companies for energy efficiency programs?
Jesse McWynn, Department of Finance. They do. There's an overlap. There's a different year. They are using a calendar year for their commitments, where we're using a fiscal year for budgeting. They cannot commit funds that are not appropriated to them for expenditure. So they may have to make some adjustments in their contracting. They have made some commitments, although those are not specified. I'm not aware exactly of what the contracts are, but they do have provisions for subject to the availability of funds as a standard in most contracts. So the contracts could possibly be amended if they have intended to spend more money than is budgeted for them.
Okay, let me ask this question. If we take the money, are we in effect abrogating these contracts and won't be able to pay the companies that are involved?
Again, they may need to renegotiate some of their contracts. I do not know the specifics, and we will look into that for you.
Ms. Skinner, followed by Mr. Nielsen.
Thank you. I appreciate the the motivation of the Senate to, in effect, move some of this money to lessen some of the burden on a couple of the Health and Human Services cuts. However, while the removal of the 162, the National Natural Gas Consumption Surcharge does not directly is still preserving those funds that were set aside for CARE and LAE, the low-income assistance, there is latitude for PUC now to use some of this natural gas surcharge for more low-income programs. And while the low-income programs are being protected by this move, if the need is greater, and I think what we're seeing now is with a rise in unemployment and rise in various economic pressures, we've got more people who are needing either assistance or help in trying to get their utility bills lowered, whether it's directly through our bill type of assistance, or whether it's through efficiency programs to their to where they live. And right now, that fund can be utilized for that, even though it's not designated explicitly. So I have a concern about, in fact, emptying it entirely. The other concern I have about emptying the natural gas one is that if we look at our gains in efficiency, in other words, our gains in reducing load, we've had more progress in reducing electrical load than we've had in natural gas load. So I have I'm trying to figure out ways that we might still achieve the Senate's goal of getting some cost savings here, but without entire removal from that fund. And so, similar to Mr. Fuentes' question, it was sort of looking at a mixture, perhaps, of reductions from, say, PEER, a couple of the other things, and this fund, rather than eliminating this one. I think you probably commented on it in your question in your response to Mr. Fuentes, but if you have any other comment on that, I think that's something that we're asking staff to look at and to try to play with, how we might get near the number of what the Senate's trying to achieve, but not by taking it entirely from that fund.
Okay, Mr. Nielsen, followed by Mr. Huff.
I'd kind of tag along with Assemblymember Skinner's logic on this, and one of the concerns is these particular programs will continue. The money will be shifted here, but then I would expect then the ratepayers are going to be hit for the continued fundings, in effect kind of a imposition of an extra fee or tax on their bills. Would that not happen? If you're going to continue these programs, you've taken some money. Now you're going to backfill that by an increased burden on the ratepayer, would we not?
No. For 1 year suspension.
The action that the Senate took essentially provided for trailer bill language that would ensure that the programs suspended in the budget would be suspended in the budget year, and therefore we would not basically
so
need
it has
to
suspension
continue.
language.
That's right.
There's no requirement to go ahead. No money would be available for that period of time of the suspension.
That's what the trailer bill language would reflect.
Okay, Mr. Huff, followed by Mr. Lamb.
May I comment on the LAO? It is budget bill language rather than trailer bill language. This was a one-time reduction. And so the activities are being suspended with budget bill language. It does not require trailer bill because it's 1 year only.
Thank you for the clarification. Mr. Huff.
Yes, thank you. I want to follow up on a question that was posed by Senator Emerson, and that has to do with whether there are any ongoing contracts. We heard from Finance on this. This was not, I don't know why this thing sounds like going in and out. This is not a governor's proposal, I understand. It's something we did in committee, but does LAO know of any contracts that are outstanding that would be encumbering some of these funds?
To our knowledge, we don't. We would concur with Finance on this particular issue.
Okay, well, I happen to do know of a contract, and that makes me wonder if there are more, because ignorance is not a definitive answer, and I don't mean that with any, ill respect. But Kaiser Steel, former Kaiser Steel, it's now California Steel Industries, 1,000 employees in Fontana, it's the old Kaiser plant, entered into a $70 million improvement. $1 million of that was obligated from this fund. This was executed in 2009. And so the question again is, if you have these contracts, and we don't know how many there are, I think we've heard that from both Finance and LAO, and certainly the committee staff doesn't seem to know either, does that create a problem for us? And what do we do about these people that are operating in good faith with yet another state agency for a state program, and then we pull the rug out from under them? Is there a legal issue here?
Mr. Huff, Mark Newton, Legislative Analyst's Office, just on your point, should probably clarify that the gas consumption surcharge fund is a non-budget fund. It's unlike some of the other the energy efficiency money that is collected by ratepayers but stays and is administered by the IOUs. So it's certainly within the legislature's appropriation authority to adjust the budget from that fund in the budget year. We're dealing with the budget year option. That's as with any on-budget funding source.
Okay, but is it a good idea? You're, representing the nonpartisan, best practices we should be operating here. We've set up a fund from ratepayers to fund specific actions, and once again, we're in the process of trying to sweep that in to fund some other one-time expenses. Is that a good proposal from your department's viewpoint?
We put the option actually on the table for the
without knowing whether there's any contracts out there?
It's a non-budget fund, so it's within the with any budgeted fund for the budget year that any contracts have to fit within the budgeted appropriation.
With all due respect, I hear the words coming out of your mouth. That is just a travesty to the people that have counted on this program. We try to encourage jobs here. We try to encourage expansion. The steel industry is one that's been driven out of the state. They only remanufacture steel now. They're still a huge industry, but they have 1,000 employees. They have very expensive gas because they got to fire the furnace to melt this stuff up. And so when they apply to a fund, we say, well, it doesn't really matter because there's a technicality. We can do whatever we want with the money. I don't take that. And I think that as a group here, we should not be sweeping all of this money in there. We should be finding out what contracts are out there, and we should also be making sure that we cover those contracts and not throw these businesses under the bus once again.
Mr. Fuentes had a follow-up, and then Mr. Leno.
Yeah. On that point, the fund, I mean, as it's proposed now, has got, you said, $560 million in the total fund, 20% of which is sort of dedicated to low-income, sort of LIHEAP care programs.
LIHEAP, 50% care. Right.
50, okay, and so, right, within that. And so To Mr. Huff's point here, if there are existing sort of contractual obligations that have been signed and entered with in the state, don't those folks have protections as a result of sort of the action that's being proposed? Because we're only taking $162 million as proposed. There's still $338 million or so in the fund. Aren't those sort of folks that are in a contract with the state protected?
I can't offer up a legal opinion on that. What I would say is that what we should understand is why the PUC is entering into contracts that are subject to budget approval prior to having that budget approval.
Very good. So maybe, I guess this item, I would suggest, Mr. Chair, remains open until we understand sort of what the PUC is doing, and maybe we can come up with some additional sort of information to safeguard those folks who are contracting with the state, or at a minimum understand sort of what their recourse is. Maybe they just get to stop action. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's certainly the action we're going to move toward. We have some additional questions. Mr. Leno.
Thank you. I just want everyone to calm down a little bit here. This did come from the Senate side, with the certainty that there is over $1 billion reserve. So if there's $1 million in a $70 million contract that Senator Huff is concerned about, we can easily place some language into the budget bill language that would hold any contract harmless, so there's no concern for any contract. Now, that I think goes without saying with the $1 billion reserve in this fund. And that is correct. You said over $1 billion?
Well, the CPUC has an annual $1 billion energy efficiency program.
So an extra billion, new billions come in every year. But just to make sure that no one has any concerns, we can include language in the budget bill language that would respect every contract, so there's not even a doubt. And I do believe we should leave this open because this is for more conversation. With regard to Assemblywoman Skinner's concern, and I think it's a real concern, and that's why we wanted on the Senate side certainty that the energy low-income program and the CARE programs would not be impacted. Your thought being that if it's a very cold winter and we've got many people unemployed, there might even be greater demands on the energy low-income program or the CARE program. So to even augment those programs, these are our Sophie's choices right now. Do we want to consider augmenting programs while we're trying to find some dollars to restore some funding to IHSS or adult day health care or to child care? These are our tough choices right now. And I would also just put out there that the Assembly reserve right now is $300 million. Ours is about $600 million. And so if we... No, it's not. It's just so if we can find another 162 somewhere else, all the better. But if not, it only lowers our reserves and makes our challenge greater.
You have a follow. Well, Mr. Emerson had a follow-up, I believe, as well. Then Ms. Skinner, and then Mr. Huff. I just want to say, though, we're going to keep this item open so we can have a little more discussion about it. I don't want to cut off discussion. We're going to work toward a compromise, but so we don't have to spend the whole day on it. But let's continue the discussion. Mr. Emerson, then Ms. Skinner, and Mr. Huff.
My comments will be short, but the problem I have here is this is a ratepayers fund for these programs, and we are willing to start sweeping these dollars out here and not even take into consideration what contracts are out here. And I think the response by both Finance and LAO is just unacceptable, and we need to get down to the bottom of that before we make these kinds of decisions.
Skinner.
Thank you. Senator Leno, you're absolutely right, and the Assembly version needs to we need to increase the amount that goes to reserve. It shouldn't be as low as 300, so I totally agree with you there. And if you, the point of my comments was to laud the Senate for trying to look at some sources that could allow us to deal with some of the human services cut. My only issue is I think that we might be able to achieve it through some proportionate cuts to all those programs versus the elimination of this one. And while you're correct, there is $1 billion reserve of the PUC. It's my understanding, and I could be corrected, but that reserve is primarily from the efficiency side on electricity, not on natural gas, and that this may be one of the only pots that goes towards those activities relating to natural gas. And so that was part of what my concern was. By eliminating this one fund, then we are sort of eliminating a focus on one part of our kind of energy mix. But we still, as we're going to keep the item open, we have still a little time to try to get those questions answered and to see whether we can achieve a similar type of savings as the Senate is attempting, but through a little bit more of a mix.
In fact, to follow up on that, and then I'll go straight to Mr. Huff, to ask the Department of Finance if you see that, the wisdom in creating a mix of some sort and maybe having some come from the energy efficient, from the electric side of the efficiency versus having it all on the gas side.
Sure. We're happy to keep looking at this and work with your staffs. As I said, we're still in the preliminary stages of reviewing this, so we'll take a look at all the questions that have been raised here and have a much more complete answer for you next time we come back to this.
Great. Mr. Huff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's a letter of opposition to this action from the Natural Resource Defense Council. I look long and hard to find agreement with them. For once, we have it. And here is what this creates. This was a bipartisan bill in 2000. It needed 2/3 vote. Republicans reached across the aisle, joined Democrat colleagues to create this. That's what gives you cover for sweeping it now. Had it been a majority vote, this would be flagged fiscal, tax. You wouldn't be able to do it on a majority vote. But it destroys the whole trust that we all say we value in this institution of coming together for good policy and working bipartisan, what's for the state. And in the process, you pull it off for gimmicks, one-time funding. You're still going to have the problem next year unless this recovery comes quicker than we anticipate. You're possibly throwing some people under the bus that have already entered into contracts. We don't know, but that doesn't mean they're not out there. We know of at least one. But the thing I would like to hang most before we go forward on this, yes, there's a lot of programs we would like to cut. To save. We have some ourselves that we were not given the ability to reshuffle some of the cards on the deck. But that doesn't mean we should take something set aside by ratepayers to benefit the low income in energy efficiency, because we have not been able to figure out a way to finance this above the table. We've got to go rip off a previous agreement. I very strongly disagree with taking one dime of this money because it just violates the whole principle behind it on several levels.
Thank you. Okay, without any additional comments or questions, we're going to keep this item open clearly. And we're going to move to item number 2, fire protection, permanent funding. If I could ask the Department of Finance to begin with that.
Sure. This issue is really about what the appropriate pot of money it is to fund fire activities. Over time, the E-Fund had gained more activities that were more attributable to the base budget. So what the administration's proposal, which is closer reflected in the assembly version here, was trying to do, it was following up on direction from the legislature in terms of zero-based budgeting our fire costs, and we've identified these costs that do belong on the base budget side instead of the emergency fund side.
Okay. LAO?
Leah Moore, LAO. We have proposed a compromise for an approval of $33 million of the $42.7 million proposal, which includes Hell Attack and Air Attack funding, and to deny 9.7 of the proposal, which have merit but are of lower priority, to deny without prejudice.
Additional comments or questions from members? Mr. Nielsen.
Just quickly, maybe the analyst would know. Does CAL FIRE have any difficulty with the large air tankers? Now, they've sometimes been integral in some of our firefights, that they can do without those for right now, that component of our capability is okay to be on hold?
Ken DeRosa with the Department of Finance.
Mr. Nielsen, the concern with not having a fund source available and as part of the budget for the very large air tanker is that if that air tanker is needed, then those costs come from the E-Fund. And so instead of being a contracted cost, which is better managed and maintained, those incident costs increase as sort of an on-demand, if you will.
Ms. Harkey.
On that front, I did have CAL FIRE people in my office, 3 or 4 of them, and we were discussing the issues that affect them. And they said they can do without their tanker, but the bigger problem is that in the future, what we are doing that we need to actually expedite timber harvest plans and work with our private industry. That it seems that the regulatory agencies are enhancing the regulation of these areas such that the private sector is leaving or no longer assisting, and so CAL FIRE's expenses are going to go up geometrically as this progresses. So this is one area that I would like whoever has a personal concern, with the forest and wildlife management area to look at to see how we can incorporate our private timber companies into helping CAL FIRE, because CAL FIRE claims they need that help to thin and maintain the lands, that we're kind of overloading them by eliminating what the private sector can do economically, and so hence decides to leave the state. Thank you.
Mr. Nielsen.
Well, I thank Assemblymember Harkey for bringing it up, and I should have. That's one of my passions. Forest and wildland management are integral. It's one of my resistance to the fire tax of last administration. We need equipment, but we need to manage our forests and our wildlands to reduce the fuel, which is in fact better management of the forest. And such things as timber harvest plans and many other impediments to that good management have been put to the fore over a long, long time. It is now time to reckon with that. Fuel management and better management of our forests and wildlands is a real key aspect of diminishing the tragic impact of massive forest fires as they affect life, property, and land.
In response to those points, I would simply note that part of the funding that's identified here is for defensible space. We recognize that, given the abbreviated time frame that the legislature has had to look at this, the Senate action was to deny without prejudice. I believe our preference would be that we have the opportunity in the spring to look at this as a full, comprehensive package as it was presented in the governor's budget. I think we're somewhat reluctant to fragment this at this point.
So it sounds like if we go with the Senate version, deny without prejudice, we can really address this issue come May, and that seems like a prudent course. So I'm prepared to move the Senate version. Oh, yes, Mr. Huff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Whoever wants to weigh in on this, is the funding associated with these deny without prejudice actions being counted as general fund savings for this budget?
The way our tracking system is working, basically, it's going to look as though the funding's not there. So if you're concerned about that, you could do one of two things. One is...
That was a yes to the first question, and then if I'm concerned, this is the answer of how we can deal with it.
You can do one of two things. Obviously, just realize that there's this part of the reserve is going to be necessary to fund this if the legislature goes ahead and does that later. Or you could set up a separate sort of set aside where it wouldn't show up in the reserve, and you'd kind of have a set aside for items that were denied without prejudice. This is by far the largest issue, I believe, that falls into this category. So the total is under $100 million, but it is a good issue that because of the accelerated process here, some items that are being put off till the later spring won't be reflected in the numbers.
So we will be scoring as savings, yet alone something we know is going to happen because we have a history of fires in California. I just want to say that to those of us that believe government should be looking at each line item on either a zero-based or performance-based budgeting process, This flies smack in the face of that because we know it's an issue, we know we need it, and yet we want to score the money now without prejudice, but we're still scoring the money. And then when it happens, we'll just pull it out of our reserves or find a way to do it. We know what's going to happen. Set it aside. I mean, even when we've had money set aside, we haven't had enough set aside. We have a lot of rains this year. You know what that means? That means wildfires in the summer and fall. So let's not play these little games and shuffle the money around to keep our little programs going for one more year when we know we're going to be spending this money down the road. Let's be the mature adults we need to be, make the tough decisions, keep this in the budget, and don't mess with it.
Okay, the action is Senate version. Oh, Mr. Nielsen had a comment? All in favor? Or I guess we take the roll on these. What's that? You don't have a roll book. Clerk has a roll?
You can just come to us.
Okay.
So passes on version.
How many aye votes are there for this?
3-2 over here.
For the Senate version? 1, 2, 3, 4 on the Assembly side, and aye on the Senate side. 1, 2, 3, 3. So it's 3-2 on the Senate side and 4-0 on the Assembly side. When Ms. Skinner can add on when she gets back. Okay, next item, item 3, off-highway vehicle trust fund shift. Department of Finance.
Sure. This is similar to the first issue we talked about in terms of transferring funds from the off-highway vehicle program. This fund was involved in a court case, the Malibu case, which sort of raises our threshold here. So for us to be comfortable with this, we'd need more discussion in terms of why this doesn't violate the previous court case.
Elio?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. On the legal issue, we're quite comfortable that the transfer is legal, and we're quite aware of the previous litigation. Just very quickly, the Off-Highway Vehicle Trust Fund is what Legislative Counsel calls a mixed fund. Its revenue sources come from various sources, including the motor vehicle fuel tax, as well as entrance fees to OHV parks, as well as OHV registration fees. Some of those fund sources are general fund fungible, others are not. The regulatory-like fees, the registration fees that are paid by OHV operators and owners cannot be taken and cannot be swept, but the motor vehicle fuel tax revenues can. Those are like general taxes. So transfer of this amount is fully legal. The reason for the litigation from several years back was that there wasn't a distinction between the portion of the funding that was fungible and what wasn't, and there wasn't any discretion exercised issued in that. But this is fully legal.
Mr. Huff, followed by Mr. Nielsen, followed by Ms. Harkey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, once again, this must be red meat day because this one, gets me seeing red again. As an off-highway vehicle user, I supported increasing our fees because the pretext was it would keep these areas open and it would allow these folks that have diminishing resources to go out and about in this. I don't know what the industry is. I'm sure it's in the billions, though, between the sale and the service and the fuel and everything else. But it's a huge industry in our state. And your contemplated action here would once again take a mediated bipartisan agreement and sweep it in for one-time funds in what may be illegal. We have difference of opinion. But nevertheless, it certainly violates the trust in this building. And the longer I spend up here, the more I don't trust anything you guys say. You say yes today and we have term limits or whatever else. There's no honor in the building. So if you can do it, legally or not, you do. So if you want to foster bipartisan support on issues, recognizing someday you might be the minority, you got to honor agreements. And taking this money and sweeping it off while closing down the off-highway vehicle areas, you're cutting back management supply or management resources. I mean, that's just the opposite. The industry was behind this before because it helped keep them open. In effect, the industry is willing to tax themselves to keep this open. And now you're going to close them down and use the money for something else. Again, it's just not right.
Mr. Nielsen, followed by Ms. Harkin.
this is one area of our state parks that works. This is revenue generation. This is visitors coming into the parks. Our new resources secretary has just offered it as part of the plan of the future. That's one of the things we need to do, increase the utilization, getting more people to come. This is a net increase. I could see that we could, I would request to leave it open, but maybe consider a $5 million loan with some terms of that payback, not just being open-ended that the agency can utterly and absolutely ignore. But I think this is a huge issue, and as Senator Huff has actually stated, the industry's been very generous in giving up, or the off-road vehicle users and participants have given a lot. They've given it to SOAR already, including their green sticker fees being doubled. This is something that we should look at as an answer to the future of keeping our parks going, but not grabbing these revenues right now and creating disincentives for people to be off-road vehicles. I mean, I might be a little bit harsh here, but I think there's some people that don't want to have any off-road vehicles at all in the state of California, and there are certain backdoor ways they are exploiting to try to deter that. This is something that we have to have an incentive to continue the utilization of our parks with off-road vehicle individuals. So, I'd suggest a consideration of something like a $5 million loan to help the budget, but I would not want to go beyond that.
Mr. Nielsen, members, if I may just clarify one point just for the members' consideration, that at this level of transfer proposed by the Assembly or adopted by the Assembly of $27 million, that would leave state operations of state OHV parks totally unscathed. The $27 million is essentially the amount that goes to local assistance, so not to state OHV parks.
Is this not also, though, establishing a precedent of taking from operational funds? That this seems to be a dangerous slope we're going to start embarking upon here.
Essentially, the policy issue before you is you're dealing with revenues that are essentially akin to general tax revenue. So it's simply the legislature's policy priorities of where best to put those dollars.
Mr. Chair, if I could, please.
Yes.
Thank you. A few points to raise for the committee's consideration. Last week, action was taken in both houses to secure loans from a variety of special funds to the general fund as a result of the sale-leaseback cancellation. One of those loans was $21 million from the OHV fund. Mathematically, if a $27 million transfer is achieved from the OHV fund, the fund will be upside down. Not structurally deficient, but will be in a negative balance at the end of the 11-12 year as a result of that loan and now this action. To speak to perhaps Mr. Huff's point and Mr. Nielsen's point, and Mr. Newton acknowledged that the shift would come from local assistance. These local assistance grants fund 4 categories of grants: operations and maintenance by the locals for the parks, law enforcement grants, restoration grants for these facilities, as well as safety and education grants for riders, being safe OHV riders. So, we have 2 critical issues fiscally. Also, as was pointed out, this fund is funded from 3 primary sources. The motor vehicle account is a statutory transfer of $65 million every year. So if this sweep was to happen, there would need to be some way, given the LAO's contention that aspect of it is fungible, that we would have to change statutorily that annual transfer of the $65 million, because otherwise the funding would be coming from the registration fee and the income derived from the park fee, which is about $20 million of the annual OHV revenue.
Just to understand this, what the action that's being proposed is not a loan or a shift. It's a cut, a programmatic cut.
It's a transfer. It's a transfer from the fund to the general fund. As such, it would impact the funding.
You make the cut and then transfer the savings to the general fund.
No, our understanding is it's a transfer of the OHV fund to the general fund.
I think it's a cut to their support budget.
In that case, if it is a cut to the local assistance budget, then the balance issue is not a problem.
Is moot, right?
Yeah.
So as I understand it, that's not an issue with this action, because it's a cut to the support budget.
If it eliminates the local assistance funding proposed in the governor's budget, then it's not.
Okay. And is that how the LAO understands it as well?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Given the loan that the administration proposes to accommodate the transfer amount, you would need to essentially cut programs by almost a like amount. That's correct.
So there's no issue in terms of being upside down from your perspective? Okay.
No, the program reduction facilitates the transfer.
Right. So I think what the issue here really is what kind of cut we want to make to this program, if we want to make a cut to this program. I think we realize on the Assembly side and the Democrats at least that the 40 is too high, that wasn't intended originally actually as part of the action, but what is that number and what should it be? One way to think of it is do a proportional cut as we're doing to all parks. And that might be a more judicious way to go and say we're cutting all parks by, 22%, so we'll cut this group by 22%. But anyway, I interceded there. Mr. Huff, you were next with your question.
Yeah, I think the LA's exact word was they would be unscathed, and yet later he talks about program cuts. I mean, this cuts law enforcement in the parks. Isn't that right?
That is one of the components of grants that could be affected by this.
It's also, I mean, you can't say this is unscathed and you can't say that you're having program cuts at the same time. They're operating at this level because they're providing service to the off-highway vehicle users. So you start making program cuts of this magnitude, you are cutting it. And as Mr. Senator Nielsen says, this is one of the few parks that actually works because there's a funding source. So don't mess with them. Just leave them alone.
May I just clarify that point, Mr. Huff? Thank you for bringing that up. The unscathed state operations, the state operations budget can remain intact. It's the local assistance budget, which doesn't affect the state highway vehicle parks that will incur a programmatic reduction.
So we keep the bureaucracy and cut the operations. That's the opposite of where we should be going.
Local assistance does not deal with the operations of the state OHV parks. That's a state operations budget.
Okay, Mr. Leno, followed by Ms. Harkey.
If I could get some clarification from LEO, I think a compromise between the Assembly's action and our non-action might be in order here. You said that if we went with the full $27 million, that the fund would be, your word was underwater?
I indicated it would be deficient. However, that was under an assumption that the funding as budgeted in the governor's budget would stay the same and that this would sweep from the fund. If the action is to reduce the level of local assistance funding proposed and take that funding and sweep it towards the general fund, that should not create a deficiency problem at the end of the budget year.
Very good. Thank you for that clarification. And should we, the proposal I'm going to make is compromise at $10 million rather than 27, 6 going to the general fund and 4 going to state parks, which could be used to monitor those that might find themselves in a virtually closed situation so that we keep an eye on our assets. That would be less impactful for the fund, of course, by $17 million.
It would allow, if I'm understanding your suggestion, it would allow $17 million of the local assistance grants to continue.
Correct.
If that's the choice.
Yeah.
How we, respond to that, I wouldn't. I mean, we'd have to sort of understand some of the implications a little bit more before we can commit to.
So, Mr.
how
Chair,
we would
just
feel about it.
For purposes of consideration, then, whether we take action today or put it off for another day, so folks can think about it further. To be respectful of many of the good points that Senator Huff has made, compromise at $10 million, $6 million directed to the general fund, $4 million to state parks.
Yeah, what I'd like to do is leave this open. I think we're getting there. I think we're just about there. But I'm going to ask to leave this item open, but I want to give Ms. Harkey a chance. She had a comment or question, and then we'll move on to the next item.
Yeah, I did. And one of the questions, I guess, we're cutting local assistance, and I understand, but the local assistance is not the local assistance used to fund the Fed to use federal lands, which is primarily where these reside, I guess, for lack of a better term.
Is your question, does this local assistance grant go to the federal government for use of the federal land? I can't confirm that.
Okay, I understand that it does. And so this is one area where I would hope that the Assembly and the Senate would consider a more broader picture. I know there are a variety of state parks that are well managed, well used, overused in essence. If you any of the beach parks, if you want to make a reservation, you almost have to do it a year in advance, and you have to be on the web immediately. That tends to indicate there's a huge demand for these, and they're underpriced. And so I'd like to look at our whole park structure and see where the users are, which parks are actually generating a revenue, and which could be generating more for the state, so as to keep some of these things open and not be robbing a productive park, a park that can stand on its own. But I do believe for user fees for some of the local parks, I would be very happy to consider that, because we do have, it's very difficult for people to get into the parks that I know that are along the beach areas, which are the ones that I'm particularly familiar with. And we've just opened another huge area up in north of Laguna, which was, that has the cottages that you almost can't get into that at all because it's a website application, and you've got to be a year in advance. And so I think we have a lot of areas where we could look at who's using the parks, where are the real needs. This seems to be an area that there is real need and people do use. And so let's not impact this, but let's look at the overall park issue. Thank you.
Okay, just a quick clarification, then we're going to Mr. Nielsen. But we keep talking about local assistance cuts. It's programmatic cuts to the parks. That's what the proposal is, as I understand it. So, Mr. Nielsen.
Mr. Chairman, as we grapple with this in a short period of time, I've suggested both of the last 2 years we need to move much more aggressively in public-private partnerships and partnerships with local government in terms of what goes on in our parks, the actual operation of our parks. I think there's great potential for public-private partnerships, and we can't just look at the Parks and Rec running the whole thing. Let's look at some new options. That should definitely be part of our prospective considerations, even in this year's budget.
Okay, I think we're ready to move on to the next item. We're going to keep this item open, work toward a compromise. Next item, water rights program fees. Take it away, Department of
Yes, we support the Assembly here, which reflects the governor's budget to shift $3.6 million of general fund expenditures for the water rights program to fees. We feel it's an appropriate user fee to reflect the benefit of the program to the beneficiary.
Are there any comments or questions? Mr. Huff?
Hasn't this fee already been challenged in court?
Jesse McGuinn, Finance. Yes, the Supreme Court recently found that this is an appropriate fee program. The other issue regarding the specific amounts of the fees was referred back to the lower courts, but it is appropriate to levy a fee for these water rights programs.
The Supreme Court has not heard it yet, though it's being appealed. Is that correct?
No, the Supreme Court issued a ruling.
That's not our understanding.
I have.
Maybe we can keep this open till we get that resolved. Because if this is being played out, why in the world would we step into this thing and once again start taking these fees?
They have a rule.
I move the Senate version right now.
If I could speak to that, Anton Favarini Chorba with the Analyst's Office. The Supreme Court has, in fact, ruled on this, and the decision was, as Finance mentioned, there were, in fact, two challenges to this fee. One was a facial challenge, so whether the statute establishes a tax or a fee. And that was ruled by the court that the statute does, in fact, establish a fee. The second question was an as-applied challenge, so whether the way that the Water Board was charging the water rights fee payers, whether that made it, in effect, a tax. And the court ruled that there hadn't been enough information uncovered at the lower level to fully answer that question. And so what the decision on that challenge was to remand it to the lower court. And so that is a question of whether the level of the fee charged to fee payers reflects the amount of money that the program is spending on those fee payers. And the Water Board has indicated that, and argued during that case, that is proportional. It's about 5% of the programs. 5% of the program goes to regulating the activities of fee payer or of water rights holders who do not pay fees.
So the Supreme Court has ruled. They remanded it back to the local courts. That's undecided at this point.
That is correct.
All right. Then I would move the Senate version.
Mr. Leno.
Well, I agree with the legislative analysts in your opening statements that it has been determined it's a fee. We had rejected this due to the legislative litigious status. That has now been resolved. So I would move the assembly version. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, sorry.
Okay, so the first motion on the table is the Senate version. The second motion will be the all in favor of the Senate motion? Aye. So it fails 2-3 on the Senate side, and on the Assembly side, so it fails 2-3 on the Assembly side. Second motion now is the motion by Mr. Leno to move the Assembly version. All in favor of the Assembly version, indicate by saying aye.
So we've got 3-2 on our.
So it passes 3-2 on the Assembly side and 3-2 on the Senate side, the reverse of the previous vote. So that portion is adopted, but we can continue to discuss the legal questions and come back to that if there's a different legal question, different legal opinion. Moving to the next issue, item 5, Administrative Renewable Portfolio Standard. Department of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We'd respectfully ask for the $2 million to be restored to the Air Resources Board budget, but I did want to give this administration's commitment to work with the legislature on getting legislation that lays out the parameters of the program.
Elio?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Tiffany Roberts, Legislative Analyst Office. We would recommend approval of the Senate action on this item. This is a major policy area that the legislature has clearly expressed its interest in providing policy direction. Nonetheless, the ARB has moved forward in the development of a 33% renewable portfolio standard. The legislature is currently considering a new bill which would establish the 33% standard into law. And pending further legislative direction affecting this area of rulemaking, the Air Board should suspend any further activity consistent with the Senate action.
Mr. Fuentes.
Question for LAO. So I think it's scored here at $2 million, but isn't it in actuality closer to $750 million what the administration is? Maybe this is a DOF question too, but $750 million which is being spent?
50,000.
750,000 is the budget expenditure for 1 year. The $2 million comes from the entire multi-year rulemaking process. So there really is only 750,000 in the budget for this activity.
Ms. Skinner, that's the compromise.
Just some clarification. I mean, CARB is acting because they received an executive order under a previous governor, and that executive order hasn't been lifted. Clearly, if the legislature approves the bill that's before us and the governor signs it, then in effect the CARB's activity would be moot, and I would imagine that it would cease and desist in its rulemaking because there would be a statutory law instead. But in the meantime, it seems to me that we I'm not saying we're guessing, you just told us the $750,000, but I think the issue is, since this isn't a general fund scoring, the issue is just without necessarily a dollar amount, indicate that we're not approving budgetary expenditures for CARB on this rulemaking because of our intention to move on it statutorily. And I don't know if we need to specify the dollar amount, but rather we're basically encumbering whatever funds would be utilized on this for this rulemaking area. It's not going to affect our bottom line here because it's not general fund.
This issue would, in effect, it's a base reduction to the ARB budget, and so that this, because the action is to reduce their base by $2 million, it would spread over to other workload that the ARB has. So that it does make a difference on the amount of money from the standpoint of allowing the ARB to continue to do all of its functions, and that the $750 is just associated with the RPS.
Yeah, I think Mr. Leno was going to put a motion forward.
So,
did you have a separate?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In light of what Finance has just said, and I would agree with your point that the $2 million would be an overreach, overly broad, and as Mr. Fuentes has pointed out, the actual price of this project consideration is about $750,000, and also in light of the author of the bill, Senator Simitian, who had real concern of what the Air Resources bill was doing as he was moving his legislation forward, again, as the LAO has just pointed out, that I think the compromise would be then to deny $750,000, not $2 million, without prejudice. As Ms. Skinner has said, that it will become moot once the bill is signed. So we, legislature, have some control over the process, which is, again, reflective of Senator Simitian's comments on the floor today. We'll have that in place if and when, hopefully when, sooner rather than later, the governor signs the bill. Once it gets through the Assembly, let it be moot. But in the meantime, we will have taken our action to make sure that no additional expenses are incurred at Air Resources Board while the process unfolds.
Okay. And so it's been moved, seconded, and I also point out that the Simitian bill is moving on in the special session, so it will happen quickly. So I think this makes a lot of sense, and recommend a yes. So all in favor indicate.
Mr. Chairman, I'd prefer the Senate original adoption, so I'll just be a mild no.
Okay, so noted. On the Assembly side, we have 3-2, yes or no? No, 3-2 on the Assembly side. And the Senate side, we have 4-0 with Mr. Hufkin add-on. Is that correct? Yes. Okay, 4-0. I didn't hear what you said. Okay. Okay, great. That item is now agreed to. And let's move on to item 6, the Flood Safe, the Delta Knowledge Improvement Program, or the DKIP. And I think this will be the last item we take up before we break. So, Finance.
Sure. We support the Assembly here, which approved the governor's funding requests. Why don't I turn it over to Mr. DeRosa here to give you a little sense. I think there's been some misunderstanding of exactly how these funds would be used.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. The proposal that the administration submitted was part of its annual Flood Safe program proposal. One component of this was to fund research to perform known data gaps on a flood-safe study conducted by the Department of Water Resources. They proceeded with the study knowing that there were aspects of it missing because they were under deadlines to get it done. There was some confusion as to whether or not this research was subsequent to initial studies that were done, and that is not the case. This is to go back and do a recursive effort and to fill in some data gaps that are known and were articulated by GWR in its studies.
Additional comments, LAO?
Yes, we also recommend adopting the Assembly action.
as mentioned, this program will fill in gaps of knowledge in levee vulnerabilities and mitigation improvement efforts. And I believe that the concern of the Senate had partly been that whether this program and the conservation strategy will fit in with the Delta Plan, whether it would be a duplication of any efforts as part of the ongoing the developing Delta Plan. We believe that there's little potential for conflict between the conservation strategy and the Delta Plan, although they would have to operate in a coordinated manner. And the Delta Stewardship Council has indicated to us that they won't be doing the same sort of technical data gathering that the DKIP program will be doing, and they would find it helpful with developing the data plan and then later revisions of the plan. So we recommend the assembly version. Thank you.
And I guess I would just, with all due respect to my colleague at the LAO, I don't know that it's necessarily a conflict. This is a component of Prop 1E, and it's flood safe statewide. It's not exclusive to the Delta. Clearly, the Delta Plan is informed and will inform flood safety as we go forward. But this, I would hesitate for anyone to consider this in isolation vis-a-vis the Delta Plan, and that this is exclusive to that area of the state.
I mean, actually, in our discussions here, we're moving toward the Senate plan, the Senate proposal, but to add on to make sure that the denial is without prejudice, because a lot of the issues that you've raised are important, and there'll be time to deal with this. It's not come May. It's not something that we have to do at this moment.
Just one technical point: the Senate's action denied reverted $2 million that's in the current year. This is money for studies, and DWR has been doing the work to tee up those studies, to tee up those contracts, to pursue RFPs. And so the reversion of that does pose a problem programmatically.
Well, so I think the Senate, though, we're not dealing with the reverted funds. We're just denying without prejudice.
Anything for the budget year, that's fine.
Then that action would be $2.575 million.
$2.575 million.
Not $4.575. If we're understanding that correctly.
Yes, that's my understanding. I had 2.6, but same thing. 2.575 or 2.6.
Nickels and dimes.
We'll work that.
We just want to be sure about
we just want
to be sure about the current year component.
But the motion then would be to make it clear we're not reverting the current money. We're doing only 2.6 approximately, and we're denying without prejudice. That's the Senate motion with the added flair of denying without prejudice. And I put that forward and ask both sides for an aye vote on that. On the Assembly, we have 4 with 5-0. On the Senate, 3. Mr. Emerson, no, 3-1. Okay, I think we've had a nice session here. People are probably hungry, want to get some lunch. So why don't we reconvene, recess till 3:30. We'll see you all back here at 3:30. Have a good lunch.